Let's go. Let's throw it open. What do you want to talk about today?
Mike, I was listening with Debbie on the weekend. There was a gentleman, he talked about he had a gay lifestyle. Then he asked God, would he go to hell? And he got his answer. And it put the fear of God in him. He changed his lifestyle. He went on. So then I started thinking about things that I've done in my life that I thought I was fault. And now he's going out and he was speaking before a group of people and homosexuals to change their lives or they're going to, end up in the fire. And I started thinking of even my own lifestyle where I had a sin consciousness. I'd be always searching for sin in my life to repent for. And I'm wondering, and obviously a lot of this I'm thinking about is because it's already within us. Either we've heard and we have preconceived ideas because of our neural pathways, and we possibly think we're hearing from God. And you see that in a lot of the prophetic words that come out. And we're sitting there going, you know what, when we say, God, tell us, and we hear it, we're probably hearing ourselves in our own neural pathways. And I'm just wondering, is there, when we go through that, is there a way we can kind of test our thoughts? He could test his thoughts, or I could test my thoughts and say, you know what, even though that's what I believe, that's not probably from God.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me that's what I went through that process of search me, O God, and know my heart, which is where the heart really is where everything is stored. So essentially that's where our memories are stored there, our programming is stored there, all that thing is, it's a neural pathway that's connected to where it's stored. And we have three areas of neurological cells, which are the heart, the brain, and the gut. And so they're all connected so that we can get instinctive programming. We can get programming, which is what we've had from life experiences. And then we also can, get the active, what am I thinking about at the minute? And where does that come from? So when I would say, search my heart, O God, put me on trial to see if I've got any anxious thoughts or any thoughts which are not coming from a place of peace, then I want him to show me. So, in the past, I would have used the Bible to frame that to see whether that would have been good or not. But actually now I don't feel that I can use the Bible, which is actually contributing to maybe wrong ways of thinking, to actually give me the measure of which way I'm thinking. Now, some things are pretty obvious. If I'm thinking angry thoughts towards someone, that's probably because, I've let the sun go down in my anger and I've not dealt with it. And now I'm operating at a resentment or bitterness, but in general, that's where using love as the framework, is that consistent with the unconditional love of God? Therefore, God's character and nature. If it isn't consistent, then my thinking isn't right, even though biblically I may have said it was right according to certain theological systems of belief which measure certain scriptures. So, and if you come from a Calvinistic belief, then you can measure against that, and it's okay for some people not to be accepted because Jesus didn't die for them. And then that actually, taking that to its extreme, indicates apartheid and slavery and any of those, racism, because that race isn't acceptable because God didn't actually choose that race. And that's how bad it can get if you use a system of belief to validate and excuse behavior or mindsets or anything else. So you've got to go back to, it's a relational thing. Therefore, I need to take that mindset into my relationship with God and let that relationship reveal to me whether that's consistent with a loving God, with God who is a God of righteousness and justice, and all of that. What does that mean? Because it's still all going to be based in love, So I do often test my thoughts against love. And is this consistent? No. Okay, well, my thoughts aren't right then. Or my emotions, which cause me to react, are they consistent with love? Because sometimes anger is consistent with love. I'm angry over that injustice. I want to see that changed, which is very different from I'm angry with that person because they said nasty things to me or whatever, and therefore I think the way we approach the way we're feeling and the way we're thinking needs to be done in the context of our relationship with God, not from any form of systematic belief that automatically frames what we're thinking and what we're feeling. Because essentially you can find a Bible verse to excuse virtually anything and to validate virtually anything. And if it is coming out of a system of that, because, let's say, this person asks God, well, where's he going to end? Where are you going to end up? And he's framing it in the terms that he only has, which will be hell. And God says, yes, that's where you're going to end up. God does not mean what he means. God is just using the frame of reference that he's been given in the question. So am I going to this place that I think is this? Well, yes, but actually the reality of that isn't how you think. But you're still going to be in a place which is separated from me, in a sense of relationally, from that person's perspective, but not from God's, because God cannot separate anything that he's reconciled, and he's reconciled the whole of the cosmos to himself. So God can't separate anything, but we do, because of our beliefs that we're separated, and therefore that's what people will think. And those thinking patterns will determine how they frame things they hear, things they feel, all of those things. Oh, God said he's going to send me to hell. Oh, that means I'm going to be punished forever. And, I don't want to do that. But God probably didn't say that. Probably God just said, well, yeah, if you do not have a relationship with me, that will continue after death or whatever, in that way. So we do frame our own understanding, even in a conversation with God. And, over the last 2 years, I've really been very, not analytical, but I've been looking at my conversations with God to make sure that they're not being framed by my own understanding of them. Because when God deconstructed or took me through the process of deconstruction, the issue was, do not lean to your own understanding of what you're hearing or experiencing with me. So don't try and understand it, because you only can understand it with a framework that you have within your conscious thinking and beliefs. They will frame it. And then the challenge, then God has to really impact you in such a way that it shatters those beliefs. So you can't frame what you're experiencing with him according to those patterns, because he's just smashed them, because they become completely inconsistent with his nature and character of being love. And I think that's what I've experienced. And he's done it in a very loving way. And he's done it conversationally, but it's caused me to not to make an assumption that I understand anything. And even when he says something, I'm not going to just on face value think, oh, I know what he's saying. I'm going to meditate on what he says to allow his thoughts and his thinking and his heart behind it to inform mine, rather than what I may have already believed. So I would say, yeah, definitely our thoughts can be tested, but we must frame it through the relational rather than, any sort of theological mindset, belief system or understanding we may have already had. And our mind definitely needs renewing to most of those, because they're all tainted with something, by and large. Even the most loving, who talk about the Father heart of God and everything else, can still exclude people on the basis of beliefs, which certainly as what's happened over a number of things that I've heard of people who are very much teaching the Father's heart, and yet they'll exclude someone because they believe in grace. So it's like, okay, well, where does that doesn't align with the Father's heart at all. So effectively you're excluding on the basis of a belief that the Father doesn't do, because he doesn't exclude us on the basis of beliefs, because he's included us, you know. And where we do not include people, then we're not reflecting the Father's heart. And even though people maybe have the Father's heart as their main ministry focus, doesn't mean they operate out of the Father's heart at all. They just operate out of what they think the Father's heart is rather than what it actually is, which is a challenge, obviously. So.
For example, when I heard that with Debbie, when we listened to it, I tried to think of different. I thought, well, I'll put it through unconditional love. Well, unconditional love would say, no, you're not, like because the gentleman went back and said, God loves us all, he's speaking, but because you do this, you can't. Well, that's not unconditional love. And so when you can start, just like when I heard Rodney Howard-Browne once say that unless you're witnessing to 5 people a day, the Holy Spirit wasn't dwelling in you, he believed, which was, if you look at it, that was works.
Totally.
So it wasn't the whole thing always. I think what you said, it would be probably without having that deep relationship with God. Thing would be, does it flow in unconditional love? Just like you talked about grace. You know, he died for everyone. No one's excluded. That's not unconditional love.
Yeah, absolutely. And essentially, when I have conversations with him, and you know, I'm having a lot of conversations with him at the moment about rest and what it is to live in rest and what it is not to be in rest and how do you enter rest and what is rest all about, because for me that's the key to everything else. You know, I'm very careful not to try and interpret what he's saying through any sort of framework, because I want a fresh revelation of what rest means to be unveiled. So I'm just listening, and then I meditate on what I'm listening to, and I allow that to begin to frame my experience. Once I have an experience of that, then I can testify to, well, this is what the rest that I've experienced means to me in that way, because, you know, God spoke to me about it. He said some things about it. Some of them seemed quite straightforward. Others were a little bit more, what does that mean? And then the meditation around it allows him to unveil his heart towards it, which is not necessarily means I have to understand every single item around it, but I carry his heart for it. And that's what comes over when you testify to other people. Not that you've got everything 100% right, but you carry the heart towards it, and people respond to the heart of God within it. Not, you know, some of the technicalities I may or may not have fully right, because that's part of a process of engaging and understanding more over a period of time. But I get the heart of it, and I start sharing the heart of it and the gist of it. Then people can then engage God for their own engagement with it, rather than, well, we're going to create a formula for rest, because that would just then become striving to enter something by a formula rather than through the relationship that rest brings. And therefore you're back into the same thing. You cannot be laboring for your own anything and be at rest, because that's following the wrong path. So you've got to be at rest, and everything flows out of rest. Well, that's, you know, and I think you've got scriptures, obviously, that talk about entering rest. And I think one scripture sort of, I think in Hebrews, talks about strive to enter rest. And it's just like, well, that's just an oxymoron. So what is it? Because we think in English, strive means something. So we interpret that in an English sense, well, I must strive. And actually the reality is the opposite. No, we mustn't strive to enter something that already belongs to us. We accept it. So pursuing the acceptance or the relational rest actually is what outworks it, not striving to enter something by what we do. In fact, I have to stop doing to enter it. Then I'm in it. And that's the reality. And because rest is nothing to do with activity or inactivity, it's the motive of that activity. And if it's flowing from a place where I'm resting in my relationship with God, trusting him, knowing my identity in that relationship, and then everything flows out of that, that's very different from I'm doing all these works to earn God's favor and love and acceptance and affirmation and approval. that's the, the opposite to rest. I'm trying to earn something that I already have, and I think that's the key in all of these things, is to just engage relationally and continue to see it outworked. I desire relationship with God. Therefore, I'm willing to pursue that desire by making sure that I give myself the fullest opportunity of being able to have that relationship by engaging with him. So am I doing that because I've got any fear? Or no, it's just I desire it. I want more. Because I know there's so much more for me to discover and to enjoy and to experience and go deeper with. So I pursue it. But I'm not striving for it. I'm just desiring, and that desire motivates me, but I'm not motivated out of fear or obligation or duty or law or any of those things that I may have been before, because now my mind is being renewed. So I realize I can't do anything to earn any of these things. They're mine in my relationship with my dad. And he's a good dad who wants me to be a son like him, to reflect him. So that really frees me. So none of the performance orientation of trying to please God is valuable in it. I can't please God. I'm already pleasing to him, because to please God obviously comes from the notion of I'm doing something that's going to please God, rather than I am pleasing to God. Therefore, if I did something which wasn't, I'm still pleasing to him, and that's the reality. So rest comes from relationship and ceasing to try and earn anything in that relationship, but see it, that relationship is unconditional and expressed in God in such a way that he does not get me to jump through hoops for that relationship. No religious dead works, no self-righteous works, nothing that comes from me doing anything to establish something that God has already made available to me for free. And that's where I think the mindsets that come to, well, I have to behave this way, or I've got to think that way, or I've got to do this, or I've got to fit in with this. All of those mindsets are all tied to the performance of the do-it-yourself tree, and that's really, I think, the key renewal of the mind comes in that whole area, so that we truly realize how accepted we are, and how blessed we are, how loved we are. And then we enjoy that, and then that motivates us to want to freely give that to others because we freely received it. So do I have to go and witness to 5 people a day? No. I only have to witness to those that the Father may bring across my path and gives me a mandate to witness to. And for some days that might be none, who are not yet knowing God, because that's not my main focus of life. And I need to be consistent with my destiny, and I'm not going to be pressured into fulfilling someone else's view of what we should do as believers, putting people under a legalistic bondage, because that's exactly what that does. You tell someone if they're not witnessing to 5 people a day, they obviously haven't got the Holy Spirit operating in them. That is a total fabrication coming out of a religious system. No truth in it whatsoever. We need to be, and our being will open up opportunities to be able to help us engage in everything else. So yeah, I would encourage you not to strive for anything, but it's okay to ask God to search and unveil any thinking or emotions or anything else which is contradictory to being at rest, really.
Mike, I've been, listening to, or actually practicing with the meditation for rest that you did in your last October conference, and the fact about grateful and thankfulness. I was reading that they've done a study and that gratitude actually makes people happier and healthier. And so that, because they took depressed and mental people that had mental issues, and they segregated them into groups, and the people that were told about writing a thankful, grateful thing, actually it lasted in them as well. That so they've actually done studies now, and it leads you to be more peaceful and less reactive and resistant if you actually are grateful. So you know, back in the Psalms, even, you know, David would say about thankfulness, it brings you into his presence, into his courts with praise and stuff. So you know, it's really triggered something for me, you know, so I appreciate that. And they said, though, that they're discovering that gratefulness, you know, it's not in the brain. It changes things in your brain, but it's part of your consciousness.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand that, but
well, I mean, the brain is the physical organ that effectively hosts consciousness but does not contain consciousness. And the brain has obviously different parts that has different mechanical functions, but our consciousness, our mind, is way beyond those mechanical functions. And therefore an attitude of gratitude and having that thanksgiving, rejoicing way of looking at life, the optimistic looking at life, actually releases chemicals in our system, you know, positive chemicals, because we're supposed to be holistic. So our whole spirit, soul, body are supposed to work together in such a way that health is maintained through the release of the correct chemical balances within our mind. So, you know, obviously people with depression and other mental illnesses, they're trying to balance chemical imbalances with external pills, you know, but actually the body itself will produce the right levels should we be living in that place of love, joy, and peace. And therefore the sense of gratitude is a key. And, you know, most people focus on the negative. So they're always complaining or groaning and grumbling about something rather than looking at the positives of what they can be grateful for. And probably, you know, if you just put God out of the equation, how much have we got to be thankful for every day? You know, there's so much. Now bring God into the equation, and then you've got even more that actually we can be thankful for in our relationship with him and all that he's provided and all that is available and everything else. You know, it's a really important factor in actually looking at life and seeing the positive and opportunities and the amazing expectancy every day of an adventure and an opportunity to discover more and to go deeper with God and to see things from a different perspective. All of that flows from that expectancy of, hey, life is worth living. Now, I know people who are struggling mentally with mental health don't feel life is worth living. But again, how much of that is because they're not looking at all the positives, you know, and it's a vicious circle that in the end of the day, if you're negative, it makes you feel more negative, and then you become more negative, and it just spirals into, in the end, being completely without hope. Whereas if you're positive and you're looking even for the small things each day to be thankful for, to be grateful for, that actually triggers health. It triggers mental health, it triggers physical health, and it brings us into a balance where everything begins to come to that place where we live from rest. You know, and then when we're grateful, we then don't be at war with people, because we know that that isn't living from a positive attitude. When we're unforgiving and resentful and bitter, we're not at peace. Therefore, if we're not at peace, that will contribute to the way we're feeling and thinking, and then we'll find it's much harder to be grateful when you're not at peace, because you're bitter, you're angry, you're resentful. And that actually, those negative mindsets and those negative feelings actually release negative things and stop the flow of positive balance within our life. And it does come, to sometimes a choice. I have to start choosing to look at life in a different way. Yes, I can experience things from God which stimulate that and encourage me to, but actually I've got to choose. Am I going to choose to be positive today, or am I going to choose not to be? So I'm going to find one thing every day that I can be grateful for. Now, if you start doing that, it builds up. So you've got a deposit of gratitude because you've got all these things that you can think, wow, yeah, look at all these amazing things that I have to be thankful for and to be grateful for. And, it is such a positive issue that brings life, really. And I would say, from my experience, most Christians don't seem to be that positive and that grateful, because they're always complaining about something. It's like, well, what do we need to complain about? Oh, I mean, people in the UK, they'll complain about the weather, they'll complain about this, that, the other, complaining about the government, they'll be complaining about whatever, the local council, the rubbish collectors. They'll find something to be miserable about and to complain about, rather than the opposite, to actually find something to be thankful for. And everyone has got things. No one has got nothing to be thankful for. Even if it's stuff that's happened to them in the past, that can then contribute to bringing things into the present. It's just it's choice, really. And we've got to encourage people to take those positive choices, really.
Talking about being grateful, I don't know if you remember Angelo. When you came, you remember him?
Big muscular Angelo, yeah.
Okay, so on Saturday, I visited him in hospital. Right. He's had a stroke.
Okay.
And this is the second stroke. He had a stroke, I think, almost about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think he was recovering from that the last time I came, I think.
Probably.
Yeah.
So mishaps actually follow him, everywhere he goes. The first time also, they nearly botched it. They didn't even catch it in time, and that's why it progressed, got worse. I almost lost one eye in the process. So this time, again, the same thing seems to be happening. He's got a few blood clots in the neck, I think in the brain. They tried the level best to do something. They couldn't get it out. Yesterday on Saturday, they actually tried again and botched it up again. He had a his whole leg and groin area was like a purple mass of blue, because they had sort of didn't do the procedure properly. And he was so upset and angry. Like when we were talking about being grateful for something, it's like Murphy's Law follows him. If anything can go wrong, it will. And he was really, really mad. We prayed over him, prayed for him, sat through and all that. But he's got this veil in between him and the Father, and it's performance based. He actually wrote a transformation series whereby you transform yourself. But what I realized that the transformation is not the end goal. Transformation is just the fruit. It's actually knowing God that changes everything. The process of transformation is actually just to know God and to get him, know him better. So, if you can sort of, what do we do to actually change things around for him?
Well, I don't think you can change things for somebody else. You can just help contribute to their maybe changing things for themselves. And it does come down to, again, rest, not striving to be accepted by what you do or what performance there is. That's the key. And again, being angry, all that does is attract more negative things to you. Having a negative attitude just attracts negative things around you. Angels don't like negative atmosphere, so they'll be a distance from you. You have a positive thing, they're drawn to that, to praise, to thanksgiving, to rejoicing. And the reality is, it could be a lot worse. It could be dead. In reality, and that's what you've got to look at in some of these things. Does anyone deliberately go out to do that? Well, okay, if he does have some sort of curse on him or some sort of judgment that he's attracting, you see, if he's now judging the doctors, what's he going to attract? Doctors that are going to do good things, or actually doctors are going to make mistakes? Because he's now made the judgment. See, what you judge comes upon you. So if you're judging the performance of someone and, in a sense, making a judgment against that person, then all you're doing is opening yourself up for more of the same. I remember when I was 12 years old making a judgment, not that I was aware of what I was doing, but I made one on being betrayed by a couple of friends. And they betrayed me, and they genuinely did. I didn't know how to handle it. So I guess I made a judgment against them, and therefore I stopped being friends with them after a while, And so what happened? Well, that judgment followed me for the rest of my life until I dealt with it, which was years and years later. And eventually, having had numerous people betray me, because I'm inviting it, because I have this judgment as a flag over my head that says on it, betray me, betray me, betray me. So I drew betrayal because of that judgment. And that's how judgment works. And I remember as a guy, a New Zealand guy, we had come to speak many years ago, and he was quite hot on the old issue of forgiveness and judgment. And his view was, judgment comes around. If you judge, you're going to get it back. And he quoted this thing. He was driving up the road, and there was a car in front of him. He swerved violently across the road. And his reaction to them was, oh, you stupid idiots, what are you doing? Can't drive? And he was so caught up with judging them that he went down the pothole that they swerved to avoid. So the judgment came straight back on him, and he lost his tire. The whole wheel came off. So, because he made a judgment negatively, and that immediately came back on him. And so, I would, if you're looking to help somebody who has a continual sort of doom and gloom thing around them, or mishaps or negative things, they've got to change their judgment towards it and release forgiveness. When you release forgiveness and you release blessing, what does that do? Bring that back upon you. So, when it comes to people doing things like that, I'm not saying we should be doormats and we shouldn't stand up for what's right, but we've got to do it with the right attitude, not with a judging attitude, which is negative because we're angry in that way. Because anger should lead to forgiveness. If it doesn't lead to forgiveness, then it's going to lead to the opposite, and that will lead to judgment, and that will lead to resentment and bitterness and all the things which effectively come out of the way we view a situation and deal with it. So there may be a court case to be done, perhaps on, are there accusations against him? Those accusations could have been, well, he lives a judgmental life, and therefore that's what he's getting. He's getting the return of judgment on him rather than the return of blessing. You live a blessing life, you're going to get blessing, because essentially it's sowing and reaping, isn't it? You sow unforgiveness and you're going to reap bitterness and resentment, and you sow forgiveness and blessing and you're going to reap that back. So yeah, I would just sort of encourage him to look at how he's feeling and how he directs that towards others, and choose to forgive them. Even if they did make a mistake, what good is it doing blaming them? Choose to forgive them, bless them, and seek to then draw something positive rather than the negative to you. And I think, that would be the case for me. It's like if someone's got a repeated pattern of things happening in their life, there must be a root somewhere that's causing that. And identification of that and dealing with it usually then cuts that off from being able to continually plague us and come against us. So, yeah.
Mike, when we talk about the pillars in our mind, one thing I really struggle with is performance. I think probably most people do. Like you have a house because you earn the salary to buy a house. In school, because you earn the marks you had to study. Everything has been based on performance in your life, pretty much. And it's hard to all of a sudden say, and if you think back, well, if I didn't do that, if I goofed off in school, I wouldn't have passed maybe, or if I didn't work, I wouldn't have a home. And it seems almost so contradictory with everything you know.
Yeah.
That you can be pleasing without doing anything. I mean,
well, what the attitude of knowing who you are and your identity, and therefore what's attached to your identity with God, which is his blessing. God's blessing is his empowerment to prosper and succeed. So it's his blessing that empowers us to have all that we need to be able to fulfill our destiny and outwork it. Now, for some people, that maybe need a really good education. Therefore, there's nothing wrong in seeking a good education. If you believe that you're having a higher standard of education elevates you above other people, then that's performance. Having a high level of education is not performance if it isn't feeding into and contributing to the way you feel about yourself. And that's why we can be free without having to perform to earn something. That doesn't mean that we should sit around and do nothing. It's why we do what we do is the key. And wanting to be the best you that you can be, which is the you God made you to be, is not wrong. But it is wrong if you're then looking at, well, God won't love me unconditionally, therefore I'm striving to better myself because then I'm going to be more lovable. That is wrong. So the balance in the world is completely out of sync, because it is measured on, well, what you've achieved. The world will measure you on what you've achieved. God measures you against who he made you to be. And who he made you to be is to be successful in the destiny that is yours. And therefore pursuing things which are going to contribute positively to enable you to outwork your destiny is really good. But you're not doing it to earn something, you're doing it to fulfill something. And that's a different mindset. I want to fulfill my destiny. Therefore, I'm willing to go through whatever process it takes to purify my heart, my mind, to enable me to do that, to remove every hindrance, obstacle from my path, might be attached to my life. All of that contributes to me being able to fulfill my destiny. Therefore, it's a good thing to pursue. But I'm not doing it because, I want God to love me more because I'm better. And that's the balance. The world will definitely put you into a performance-oriented mold and will judge you in comparison with others. Whereas God is not judging you in comparison with anybody because you are unique and fearfully and wonderfully made. That's the key. When you know God's acceptance of who you are, you don't have to compare against anybody else or trying to compete with anyone else or do something to get one up over anyone else and get up the ladder. All of that is a worldly do-it-yourself mindset. So that's the key. The world is operating in the wrong tree system. And that's all about self-effort and earning our position in life and everything else. And it's like, I think of, let's say, looking at our royal family. You got, let's say, Prince Charles, and then you got obviously William and Harry and all that lot. And people would say, well, they were born with a silver spoon in their mouths. They didn't have to work at anything. Well, the reality is that isn't true. They were born with a position that gave them access, but they all went to school, public school. They all achieved various things. They've all ended up in the army, or they've done various things, and they've had to actually do that without the benefits of the system. I mean, old Harry, he was on the front line in Afghanistan and other places, but his access to the palace and to his mum, the Queen, and to his grandmother, the Queen, bottom line is none of that came through anything other than total acceptance and the position of being a prince. You don't have to earn being a prince. But as a prince, if you're going to be a good prince, then you need to understand, they will have had constitutional lectures and educational things talking about how the Constitution works, what their roles are within the they had to go through an awful lot of education, but that education didn't give them access to the Queen. Their identity did. Who they were did. And it's the same with us. Our access to God in relationship is absolutely on the basis that we're all his children. But how we outwork that will, to some degree, be a process of growing in wisdom and stature with God and man, which is what Jesus did. He grew in wisdom and stature with God and man. So there was a process for him of learning, but that didn't change how he felt about himself. And when God opened the heavens and said, oh, here's my beloved son, I'm well pleased, that wasn't on the basis of him doing anything or having done anything. It was just on the basis of him being. And everything flows out of being. And that's then, you then can know, if it's flowing out of being, then you'll know you're not doing it in your own strength, in self-righteousness or self-effort or self-anything. It's all flowing out of who he's made you to be. And that's fine. And there will be some people who God has appointed and has destiny to do things which are way beyond some other people. So you can't judge what one person needs to be able to fulfill their destiny as opposed to somebody else, because no one knows the other person's destiny. We're just responsible for our own. And then as we come into a deeper relationship with God, that destiny gets unveiled relationally that motivates us through desire, not duty and obligation. And I think that's the key. If we're doing something out of duty, obligation, fear, then that is not going to produce fruit. We're not going to be fruitful. Even though we may be blessed by God, if we're not taking that blessing and empowerment, but we're trying to empower ourselves, then we're not going to be successful. The world might look at us and think we're very successful. But actually, the reality is the world's view doesn't count. It's God's view that counts. Yeah.
The problem with performance-based is that sometimes when things go wrong, what did I do actually to deserve this? Because I'm doing everything right to please God. I don't know what he wants from me. So, and then that's a rut actually that you fall into and you can't come out of. That's actually what's happening to Angelo.
Yeah. It is the trap. It was the trap of following that path that the whole of humanity has been in, and the whole of humanity has been reconciled to God, and God does not count what we do against us. But the world definitely does, and we do, if we're in that trap of performance. because we have to do it independently of God, because that is the dead works of religion. You have to earn God's favor, God's blessing, God's love. Everything has to be earned. Therefore, you're trapped in performance. And then the cycle of injustice really brings oppression and depression on a lot of people. Like, well, I've been trying. I've been doing my best. Well, that's the problem. You've been doing your best. Yeah. And your best is never going to be good enough to accomplish something that already belongs to you. And that's the reality. That's the stupidity of this whole trap. People are trying to get what already belongs to them for free. But religion doesn't help, because it's promoted all of the works of getting something for something with God. Even the evangelical will pray this prayer, otherwise you're out, is totally contradictory to the reality of God's inclusion of everyone through reconciliation that everyone's in. They just need to discover it. And we've not helped them to discover it, because we've told them they're out. And you can only get in if you do this, this, or this, depending on what stream you're in. That could be taking the sacraments, being confirmed, being sprinkled, whatever the rite of passage is from being out to in, that is all performance based, rather than realizing we're already in. And that actually is the difference, I think, in a relational way of helping people to engage God, rather than the performance of earning something. And even, faith, well, just believe. You have to believe. Well, that isn't what it is. Faith comes when we have an encounter, rather than faith is something that we have to drum up to believe hard enough to receive something. And again, even faith can become performance. Repentance, in a repentance is performance. You can't be forgiven unless you show penance. Well, the reality is that's totally contradictory to what it really is. God has already forgiven us. It's only we're in the way of ourselves experiencing that forgiveness by thinking we have to do something for it, like confess. Because again, that's a mindset that comes out of the Latin confessional, rather than confess means to agree with. I'm making this confession of agreement with God's forgiveness. I am forgiven. Not, I'm going to be so sorry and I'm going to repent and then I can be forgiven, because now I've earned it because I've been sorry enough. Again, all works driven. All religion is works driven, and so many people are caught up in it. In fact, most religious systems are operating in it, one way or another. It's just, sadly.
Doesn't that might come though from the cross, where Jesus was with the two guys, and once he said you'd be in paradise with me, and the other one nothing. It's almost like one was going to go to hell and the other one was going to go with Jesus.
Well, we assume that that's what happened, but it doesn't say anything, does it? You just had one person who'd experienced the presence of Jesus and he reacted in one way, and you had someone else who experienced and reacted a different way. But bottom line is, Jesus actually went down and preached to both of them and brought the two parts all together and led them all out. So in the end of the day, it was only a temporary thing. So it, again, wasn't on performance, but response. The guy, and actually, if you go into it culturally, it's not as straightforward as what the general story has been meant to unveil. In reality, we don't understand a lot of the sort of contextualized understanding of what the Jewish person would have meant. But bottom line is, he didn't earn anything, did he? And Jesus didn't say, you must do this. And who's to say what Jesus did for the other person? Because we just draw inferences from. Because Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise. He didn't say to the other guy, today you won't be, did he? Well, we assume that that must be because he didn't say it. But that's the problem. We're basing those assumptions on performance, because that's the way which we're conditioned to think. But Jesus didn't turn around to the other guy and said, "Well, you're gonna be, punished forever in hell." He didn't say anything. But we infer from the thing because that's the conditioning of our beliefs. This person responded and Jesus saved them, and this person didn't respond and he didn't save them. Well, actually, he saved everybody. He died for everybody, and everyone's death he took, even the other thief and everyone else, and the piece of people who put him on there, and Herod and the Pharisees and everyone else who were contributing, and the high priests and all of those who said crucify him, away with him, all of them he forgave and took their trespasses, sin, identity, lost identity, everything to the cross, and nailed every accusation for all of them, which is why I think he said, Father, forgive them. Because even at that point, having not yet died, he was still looking at, I am not going to hold anything against them for what they're doing. And that was, again, unconditional, unsolicited. It is a difficult one. I know that these systems of belief are so ingrained in both the do-it-yourself pathway and the religious adoption of that people really struggle to believe how good it is, how, without having to do something, and I think that's the key, that Jesus wants people to know that they are already included in his love, in his reconciliation through what happened on the cross, and he is not holding anything against any of them. He just wants them to discover that and experience the wonderful unconditional love that he has for everybody. And unfortunately, the way the world works and the way the religious system works, it actually mitigates against people discovering that. So we've got to start loving people unconditionally the way God loves us, freely giving what we freely received, and encouraging people to see that God's already at work within them and they're not separated from it, and he doesn't hate them and he isn't angry with them, and all of those negativities that religion puts in the place, we've got to try and start removing them so that people can really see what God is really like and truly know God through that.
So, Mike, Jesus wasn't angry then at the Pharisees. He was angry at what they did.
Yeah. See, we find it very difficult to separate what people do from who they are. Whereas Jesus was calling them to come into their identity within the new covenant. And he warned them of this is what would happen if you choose to go your own self-righteous way. Actually, the consequences are yours. But the reality was, yes, they were leading people astray. That's what he was angry. It was what they were doing, not who they are. He loved them just as much as he loved everybody, But what they were doing in the religious system was obviously leading people astray so that people couldn't find him because they were tying them to a religious system. So what they were doing in outworking that religion, did he like? Absolutely not. But did he not love them? Of course he did. They're, because he's motivated by the Father, and the Father's got a love for all his children. Did Jesus want any of them to stay in Jerusalem and end up being crucified and thrown into the rubbish dump in Gehenna? No. That's why he warned them. That's why he preached to them. He preached that there is salvation from the destruction that's coming, both physical and spiritual. But he was really talking about the physical destruction that was going to come upon them, if they stayed in their own system. And he was looking to encourage them to come into the reality. What did he say? Well, I've not come to call those who think they're righteous, because actually they're never going to listen. I've come to call those who know they're not. And he was trying to get them to see everyone's unrighteous from the perspective of God, and the law cannot make you righteous. So he was trying to show them that their reliance on the law was never going to actually accomplish what they thought it would. And that was his message. And all his parables and the teaching and everything was to help people to see that there is a new and better and living way that comes through relationship with him. Sadly, some of them didn't accept that. A lot of them did, of course. 3,000 people did in one day, 5,000 another day, and many, many others chose, even those of religious leaders, Nicodemus, others chose to come out of that old system. But even that, there was this mixture of Herod and the leaven and the Pharisees that were trying to bring them back under the law, the Judaizers and everything else. So the system wouldn't let them go. And the system never wants to let us go, because we're slaves to that system, and we serve the system, which is the do-it-yourself tree. So yeah, I think having a revelation of the unconditional love of God and the wonderful grace and mercy of God and what Jesus has done really is the only thing that can free us from the performance orientation of religion. And we just need to keep introducing people to that amazing love and see them respond to that love, without putting them through the religious hoops and bringing them into some other system of, oh, now you're in, you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do the other. Because most of that is based on our understanding rather than, hey, the love of God who will transform us and change us and purify and refine us and all those things if we keep in relationship with him. Allow the Spirit to bring conviction and change, not, again, putting rules around the church, because that's what we've done. And every different church has different rules that make you acceptable or not. And none of that is based in the unconditional love of God, which is why we exclude people, because they don't fit to our norm and belief of what we think a Christian should be like. And I know a number of people who genuinely encountered God, and their lifestyle was such that they were, very unacceptable to the Christian community. So as soon as they engaged God, the Christian community set about rectifying their behavioral issues and telling them that they couldn't do this and couldn't do that. And, I knew a number who were living together with people living together, and immediately they were told, well, now you've got to stop living together or you need to get married. And they forced people into marriage. And most of those marriages didn't last because they were forced into doing something that God never intended, out of the religious thing of living together is wrong. And it's all on value systems that we've developed using the Bible to say whether this is right or this is wrong, rather than allowing the Spirit of truth to reveal the truth in his time to unveil that. So people change because they change in relationship, not because they change because they're not acceptable as they are. And we make people unacceptable as they are, and we force them to try and change and adapt to fit in. And that only puts people into more religious bondage and more whatever it does to force them to change their behaviors. And they're not doing it out of desire, they're doing it out of fear they won't fit in. So there's a lot there which I think we have to evaluate how we deal with people, how we treat people, how we introduce people into a relationship with God, and then how we introduce them into fellowship with us so that we continue to be a reflection of God's love and unconditional love. I remember talking to an Argentinian guy years ago, and he was talking about a big mission they were doing in Buenos Aires, a large church, 100,000 people. They did this big mission into this area that they hadn't reached before, and they saw many, many people respond. And they had all their programs of discipleship in place and everything in place to disciple them and bring them into the church. And God spoke to them prophetically and said, I don't want you to follow them up for a year. So, I guess when they got behind the shock of that, they obeyed it. And then when they went back a year later, they found that those people were living in a relationship with God that most people that they knew in the church weren't. And the Holy Spirit had given them the truth and revealed. They didn't even give them Bibles or anything. They encountered God, and then God kept encountering them to show the church, hey, I don't need you to try and interfere in discipleship. And they were somewhat surprised to find that most of them had a more righteous lifestyle. They weren't in bondage to religion. They just enjoyed, and therefore they changed out of relationship, not because they were forced to. Right. Okay. I need to leave it there. Okay.